Americans founded, on free speech. And, other countries follow our lead on that. But Americans in particular have a thing about it because it's in the Constitution. It's how the revolution started, in fact. So when you get down to that really core point and you're looking at it and you say, look, free speech is fundamental. What is it these social media companies have tried to do? Twitter tried to deplatform everybody who was talking about, alternative medicine and who were talking about alternative political scenarios and all the rest. Get rid of this person, get rid of that person. Facebook does the same thing. Plus, they take all your data and they give it to the FBI and they give it to the CDC illegally. Those are illegal actions. Eventually, there's going to be some kind of class action lawsuit. So we're already seeing a lot of the stories that they've been laying out there. So it's a kind of a race. The idea is, can they get their system in place with a very small portion of the public? Again, I know that people think, oh my God, everybody's gone crazy and all the rest. Actually, I believe that the numbers around 25% of support for this administration reflect more of what's going on there. Just like the Justin Trudeau 22%. These are very small controlling numbers. And what they're trying to do is get a system in place so that they can't be touchable. And the way that you do that, as we've laid out so much on this program, is the continuity of government rules, especially in America. But the continuity of government rules can go global, as we've seen. They've talked about instituting continuity of government in Ukraine and in Canada. This one, Biden establishes a Ministry of Truth. This is out of the Wall Street Journal. The Disinformation Governance Board already looks like a partisan instrument. Yeah, it's a lot worse than that, but that's a good start. Department of Homeland Security has announced the formation of the Disinformation Governance Board, charged, according to Politico, with countering misinformation related to Homeland Security. See how this is how we can bring in Homeland Security. 250,000 people doing illegal actions, doing surveillance on average citizens, moms who are complaining to teachers that they don't want their kids taught certain things. They're showing up on domestic terrorist lists. This is how far these people are going. And if they're not stopped, they're going to get down to basic levels, like, having people in the grocery store spy on you. Believe it or not, there's a plan for that. I mean, as absurd as it sounds, it's true. Department of Homeland Security has announced the formation of the Disinformation Governance Board, charged, according to Politico, with countering misinformation related to Homeland Security, focused specifically on irregular migration and Russia. These are weird tricks. They need, in order to pull in the Department of Homeland Security, they need immigration to somehow be related to it. The next piece they need is, Russia disinformation. That way they can say, we're protecting the homeland by shutting you, the average American citizen, up when you disagree with the policy of the Biden regime. All right, next up. In a twist too implausible for fiction, the abbreviation is DGB, one letter off from KGB. Excellent point. The stated goal of combating mis and disinformation is framed to seem unobjectionable. Who objects to truth and pines for falsehood? The DGB experts will guide the way, separating the informational wheat from the disinformational chaff, but there's one small problem with empowering truth experts. Experts are people. Yeah, and in this case, fascist people. People respond to incentives, therefore experts respond to incentives. And so on they go in here. There's a couple of really good points in here. The dangers of the DGB will be amplified if it becomes a tool of partisan political actors, and it already has.
We just learned about a new Department of Justice memo dated July 12th, 2024. Interestingly, that's one day before the assassination attempt of President Trump, by the way. The memo comes from the Associate Deputy Attorney General George Turner, and he explains how the FBI has been actively increasing its coordination with social media companies to censor news and information. It is an unbelievable read. I encourage all of you to go and actually read the entire thing, what it deems as foreign malign influence information. This is a continuation of efforts that began back in February of this year. So what the hell does foreign malign influence even mean? Well, the term applies a stunning 263 times in this memo. And of course, legal experts say it's so broad and it's so nebulous that it really doesn't mean anything. So how do we even define foreign malign influence? Well, we can't. Did you know that America, by the way, has a department of foreign malign influence to help us define it? In fact, this is right from the Department of Foreign Malign Influence. Where do you work? I work at the Foreign Malign Influence Department. What? What does that even mean? I don't know. I just go there every morning. That's my job. I bring a sandwich. So this is the Foreign Malign Influence Department. Here, let's see if this clears it up. This is how they describe. Can you believe they have a Foreign Malign Influence Center in the United States? So this is how they describe it, okay? When foreign actors exploit public discussions protected by free speech, educational institutions protected by academic freedom, and open economies protected by the free market to influence how Americans think, act, and make decisions via subversive, undeclared, coercive, or criminal means, we call this foreign malign influence. Does that settle it for you?
Wait. It says when foreign actors, if you go back to that, Philip, it says when foreign actors, but like we found on Twitter that the U.S. is doing it. So do they not care about local malign, like domestic malign?
No, see, this is where it's so nebulous. What does it mean to be foreign? What does it mean to be foreign? Exactly. It's such a nebulous category.
I mean, you could say that person wanted something I don't like and they drink French press coffee, which is foreign influence. Right?
Right.
It could be anything.
It could be anything. Exactly. We don't have it. It's such a nebulous term. What is concerning, of course, is that this wildly absurd definition can be used to curb free speech and restrict access to critical information, which is exactly what they want. That might not align with prevailing administrative perspective. So they can go after critical information, important information. For instance, remember when the FBI used this classification for the Hunter Biden laptop story, foreign maligned information. They reported at the time by the New York Post's Miranda Devine. Her reporting, of course, was spot on and now has been vindicated. But that didn't stop the FBI from using the foreign malign influence carve-out to censor that content from Facebook and other social media platforms. Foreign actors are trying to sway our election. You've got to suppress this Hunter Biden laptop story.
Oh, so the Hunter Biden laptop thing makes sense now, too.
Oh, yes, We'll get there. Yeah, exactly. I mean, COVID, exactly. So the Hunter Biden laptop story was initially dismissed as Russian disinformation by 51 former intelligence officials. The narrative was then further pushed by social media companies like Twitter and Facebook. They throttled the story's reach on their platforms, remember?
The FBI, I think, basically came to us, some folks on our team, and was like, hey, just so you know, like, you should be on high alert. We thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump of that's similar to that. So just be vigilant. I mean, it sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because it turned out after the fact, the fact checkers looked into it. No one was able to say it was false.
Yeah, exactly. It sucks after the fact. After the election, it sucks, doesn't it? The Hunter Biden laptop story was, of course, initially dismissed as Russian disinformation, and they all went along with it. What's more stunning, even more than the censorship, is the fact that the FBI hid that story from Americans. Interestingly, the suppression occurred despite the fact that the FBI already had authenticated the laptop's contents as early as November 2019. Almost a year before, they knew the laptop was real. So a year earlier, the FBI knew the laptop was real, knew the emails were real, knew the contents of Hunter Biden's laptop was real, and the FBI kept that information from the American people in a coordinated strategic effort, meeting with social media companies, and it's happening all over again. In other words, the FBI interfered in the American election. Bottom line. So this new FBI memo, this new Department of Justice memo, suggests that the FBI will resume regular meetings with social media companies. It says right here in bold text, again, you can read it for yourself. They're going to be coordinating and having regular meetings with social media companies.
Because the Supreme Court failed to disallow them to in a most recent case. So, that case was not about whether or not the American government had censored Americans. It had. Whether or not that was a First Amendment violation, it was. That case was only dismissed on a technicality. So there are other cases still working their way through the courts, and hopefully they will disallow or remove this ability for the government to do this. But for the time being, they are still doing it because they are allowed to do it.
Right. So, in fact, this memo points out how they regularly meet with social media companies, but they had no formalized process in place to share information and meet with them. But now they do. Now they've formalized this process. They formalized it as a result of February of this year. So their new policy, these regular meetings between social media companies like Facebook, YouTube, Google, Instagram, TikTok, they say will serve to brief and discuss potential foreign malign influence threats. So make no mistake about it, they will use these meetings under the umbrella of foreign line influence to justify censorship. That's exactly what they're doing, just like they did with the Hunter Biden laptop case. And, as David pointed out a few seconds ago, the COVID vaccine. Why did the Biden administration meet with social media companies to censor content about COVID vaccines? Of course, that had nothing to do with foreign malign influence. What about the Supreme Court, you might be asking? Well, it's incredibly alarming when we consider the landmark Supreme Court case at Murphy versus Missouri, which was decided back in June of 2024. Of course, we covered that here on the show. The Supreme Court, in a 6-3 decision, ruled that the federal government could continue its collaboration with big tech to censor speech that it deems unfavorable, even if such posts contain factually correct information.
Although the court's main dismissal of that case was for standing. It was about who had been damaged and why. The court did agree that the government had done this, and most of the justices agreed that this was inappropriate. So even though we're going to go over some of the things that might have been a little bit more concerning about their opinions, there are other cases. I refer you to the video that Jed Rosenfeld did on YouTube about this very case and why it fell apart at the seams and what cases we can still hang our hat on. Yeah.
Grab our butts on.
Hold on. Yeah. Get excited about whatever you want to do.
So, of course, remember Justice Amy Coney Barrett, of course, who's a Trump appointee, who authored the majority opinion on this, said the censorship is necessary to counter foreign interference campaigns. So she sided with the side of censorship on this. Samuel Alito basically lost his mind in his decision. He said, no freaking way. He said this decision is blatantly unconstitutional and said that it undermines the very foundation of free speech and it would be remembered regretfully in the future. I'm remembering it regretfully right now. And because the FBI is using this basically right now as a blanket of protection, I guess, until these other cases are able to make their way through the Supreme Court. So I would argue that this FBI and intelligence agency suppression of information isn't happening in a vacuum. It has significant implications for the upcoming 2024 elections. Again, Hunter Biden. A poll showed that they had they known about the corruption of Biden and Hunter Biden, the collusion with Ukraine, all of that, the emails and the laptop story, they would not have voted for Vice President Biden for president. It would have altered their mind about the election. But because they didn't have that access to that information, the FBI saw to that, well, then their minds were made up for them. So they could vote however the FBI wanted. I would further argue that our republic hinges on people being informed. All of you people watching right now, there's tens of thousands of you on YouTube and Rumble and X right now watching this show. We have a right to have access to all the information that you need in order to make a decision. Not that the government tells you what you can have access to. You know, as our friend Tucker likes to point out, most of the major media organizations, the corporate media, you know, you're talking CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, they lie every day by omission. It's what they don't tell you. It's what they conveniently leave out of stories. So the mainstream media is doing that. And now the FBI colluding with social media companies to make sure you don't have access to certain information because they can use this nebulous term of foreign malign influence. It's incredibly disturbing. So now the FBI openly admits they're working hand in hand with private companies like Google and Facebook to censor information related to the 2024 upcoming election. They will determine what you see and hear. They've put it in writing. They've formalized their approach to sharing content that they want censored. This is absolutely chilling, in my opinion. People may become fearful of speaking out, may become fearful of posting a video like that or sharing information on social media for fear of retribution. Maybe they'll be worried that their Facebook accounts will be shut down, God forbid. What if you engage in content that the FBI deems, is undesirable? Will you will you be monitored and watched by the FBI and the CIA? We've already seen plenty of videos over the past couple of months of the FBI showing up at people's houses, knocking on their doors, questioning them about posts they've made on Facebook. Really? What are you doing at my house? Because I posted something on Facebook that you don't deem part of your narrative. You're at my house? Really? Go ahead, David.
Well, I was just going to say, and like they manipulate the results. Like if you search for Donald Trump, most of the stuff is, Project 25 and all that stuff that he said he's not part of or whatever, the agenda. So it's like they're manipulating, like this is actual election interference, and they're just serving up like whatever narrative they want you to think. So it's like you could get, if you search Donald Trump, you might be like, okay, this person is certain they're a right-wing, nut job, so we better watch them.
Right. And what we learned in the White Women for Kamala Harris call over the weekend is you are responsible for your algorithm. So they clearly want you to see what you should be searching for versus what you should not be searching for. I mean, I guess any of us who are readers, we know anytime you put in a book that might be considered wrong-think, they're like, no, you want Prince Harry's book. You want Barack Obama's book or Michelle Obama's book, right? They're trying to push you into a certain algorithm. And I feel every day like I'm fighting against that algorithm. Like, no, I want to see this. I want to see what is behind this. I want to watch this video. So the algorithm is not our friend.
That's the thing that it pisses me off the most is that they're telling you what they don't want you to do by doing it to you. Like we're trying to protect you from what we're doing to you.
Yeah.
You have wrong thing.
Right.
Yeah.
We're trying to keep you in a protective bubble so you don't have access to information that might be posted on a, Al Jazeera website or an Israeli website or a
redacted newsletter.
A redacted newsletter
right.
or a Russian website or an Uzbekistan website. Like we want to protect you. We want to protect you from information. As Lux Dove in our chat says, this is the UK playbook that is happening right now. It's exactly what they want for the United States. Yeah, the United Kingdom. Exactly. Thank you, Lux. So I'll say this. Think about how this warps our perception of reality, right? Mm-hmm. How many people do you know kind of around you that maybe don't follow the news a lot? They don't watch Redacted. They're not informed. And I don't say like if you watch Redacted, you're informed. I think we try to question everything here on this show. We try to present you with the facts and not force anything down your throat. You make a decision about who you want to vote for. That's totally up to you, of course, not what we deem is the narrative. So how many people have like a warped perception of reality because they're just spoon-fed Google News or Apple News and they get their information from CNN or FoxNews.com, right?
And just repeat things like the COVID vaccine was very effective and saved lives. I'm like, oh, okay, tell me more about that.
Right.
Why do you think that? Tell me about that.
Right. Can you point me to the studies that show that?
Things like Kamala Harris is an accomplished politician. Okay, tell me more about that. Those are the headlines, but what do you know about it?
So these big tech gatekeepers, they continue to control what we see and hear. Personally, I think it's imperative to recognize and challenge all of these fascist attempts right now to manipulate information, to censor content, to question everything. And it's only going to get worse over the next 90 days ahead of the election. So grab your butts. Grab your hats.
That's not it. It's hold on to your butts.
Hold on to your butts. Grab your hats. Don't let them manipulate you guys. You might be shocked to learn that big tech is already censoring information about America's presidential race. I know it's shocking. Shock me if you've heard this before. Specifically, posts about Biden's replacement. In the past few days, YouTube has gone after channels that are asking critical questions about the Democratic nominee. The woman who no one voted for, but who is now Biden's replacement. You know her name. The censorship started almost immediately right after Biden announced that he was dropping out of the race. The censorship industrial complex went into overdrive. It was like a coordinated effort. They all started removing videos critical of Harris, blocking comments critical of Harris. Reddit forums right now are alive with all kinds of users posting their experiences about this censorship on YouTube. And remember, Reddit is a liberal paradise. So, this is a place where liberals are going on Reddit to complain about being censored on other platforms. Like, here's an individual who's like, I've been a premium YouTube subscriber for around 7 years now. I'm pretty active in regards to voicing my opinion on various channels. Yet this morning I made a comment simply listing all of Kamala Harris's actions and statements over the past few years, only to have that comment immediately removed and banned for 24 hours due to hate speech. So that's happening. You can read more of those posts on Reddit if you like. Amazon actively removing and censoring books critical of Harris as well. For instance, journalist Caleb Maupin, his book, Kamala Harris and the Future of America, had been up there for 4 years. 4 years. When suddenly, right after Biden steps down, his book gets removed by Amazon. And they reached out to him and said, it's because your cover was problematic. And he had a picture of Kamala Harris on the cover. So then he's like, okay, you know what? I'll make a really generic cover. I think you can look at it here. It's like a picture of like the Aurora Borealis. He's like, all right, I'll find the most generic thing I can do, and I'll just I'll just title it Kamala Harris and the Future of America. There's no picture of her, and they still rejected. He did it multiple times. Rejected. So it's been up there for 4 years. Almost to the day when President Biden steps down and announces he's resigning and he's not going to run for president anymore, suddenly Amazon deletes that book. It's amazing.
That's
it's amazing
wild.
how that works, isn't it? Biden, of course, we know that the Biden administration had pressured Amazon before, right? We covered that here on the show. Specifically on vaccine misinformation, reducing visibility of COVID-related books. So if there were books out there talking about COVID on Amazon, the Biden administration, we now know, thanks to the Twitter files, and other emails, was specifically leaning on Amazon to suppress those books. We know that. And this morning, thanks to the New York Post, we learned that Google's autocomplete feature is censoring information about Donald Trump's assassination attempt. You can't make this up. Michael Kurson also wrote about this. Google memory holes attempted assassination of Trump. So libs of TikTok even pointed this out. Even if you type out the entire word, no results autofill on Google. We're witnessing the erasure of history in real time. Unbelievable. So you type out assassination attempt Trump, and it won't even populate it. So again, Google purports to be the organizer of the internet, right? To give you the most accurate and up-to-date information, and when you need it at a moment's notice. That's Google's mission, right? Also, their mission is do no evil, but you know, we all laugh about that, right?
To Hunter Biden.
Right. Do no evil to Hunter Biden.
I tried that. I actually, after I saw that, I went and tried it, and it is true. Like, I had typed in assassination attempt of TRU, and it says Truman, says all these different lists, but then you have to complete Trump, and even when you do, it doesn't finish it, and then you get information. But yeah, it's crazy.
Well, I did it as well. Attorney General Andrew Bailey also did it. He from Missouri. He's on it. Apparently going to be going after Google and looking into this. The Attorney General of Missouri says, I'm on it. So anyway, to David's point, I decided to test it out too. I don't want to just take the words of libs of TikTok. So assassination attempt on. Okay, what do you think would be the most relevant search? Trump doesn't show up. Let's see, on true.
Lenin.
Nope. And then you know what? I went back and then I realized,
Johnson?
I forgot a T. So let me fix that. Okay, attempt on. Now let me make sure I type it out fully. I'm just going to type it out fully here, make sure that I'm not screwing anything up. All right, assassination attempt on. Nope, no Trump. On Truman. Who's looking up an assassination attempt on Truman right now? No one. Or President Human. President Reagan? Gerald Ford? No. So there you go. Elon Musk tweeted, well, there's probably a reason why that's the case, because Alphabet is donations, probably just a coincidence that Alphabet Google employees were the top donors to President Biden. It is kind of shocking, isn't it, when you think about it? I'm sure it's just a bug, as Blue in our chat just says, yep, I'm sure it's just a bug. Also, Elon Musk tweeted this just a short time ago. Also, Google searches. So that's like full-on searches. Now search for Donald Trump. When you search for Donald Trump, what do you get? You get news about Harris. You can't make this up. Really? Type in Donald Trump. I would probably want to get information about Donald Trump. Instead, Google wants you to see information about Harris. They just want want to shove it right in your face. Shove it right in your face. It's unbelievable.
And only smiling, flattering pictures of her as well.
Oh yeah, no cackling videos,
smiling,
nothing like that.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Alexa, which is Amazon's voice-activated assistant that might be on your Echo One or Echo Show or whatever that you might have sitting in your house. So here's an example of asking for information about the assassination of Trump on your Alexa device from Amazon. Watch.
Alexa, what can you tell me about the assassination attempt on Donald Trump?
Sorry, I don't know that one.
Alexa, what can you tell me about the assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan?
On March 30th, 1981, President of the United States Ronald Reagan was shot and wounded by John Hinckley Jr. in Washington, D.C., as he was returning to his limousine after a speaking engagement at the Washington Hilton.
That's interesting.
Okay. Thanks, Alexa, for the most accurate and up-to-date information about that. And of course, again, you have Google searches that are doing the same. Mark Zuckerberg's Facebook, Instagram also censoring photos. So, not to be outdone, Mark Zuckerberg getting in on this. Jack Prosoviak tweeting this just a few minutes ago. Breaking, Meta is now censoring actual photos of the Trump assassination attempt. So the actual photo of him pumping his hand in the air with blood on his face, now good luck sharing that across Instagram and Facebook. Now, a Facebook employee or Meta employee did respond saying, "Oh, we got some false positives from some AI images that were similar, so that's why it was giving us a false positive. It's been corrected now." Okay, sure. And a lot of people questioning this in the comments, which is, do you guys ever make a mistake on the other side? It always seems to be that you're making the mistake on this side of things, but it's never in the reverse.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Philip. If you needed any more evidence that a deep state group of thugs is running the United States government into the ground, then look no further than the major developments we've seen over the past 24 hours in Washington, D.C. Ambulances racing to the White House, roads blocked off. They won't tell us what's going on. It's America's house, but did Biden have another stroke? Who's actually running the country? We have no idea. They won't tell us. Tulsi Gabbard calls Kamala Harris a deep state communist that's controlled by the military-industrial complex.
Foreign policy decisions are being made by unelected people in the military-industrial complex who are profiting from us being in a constant state of war. Kamala Harris does not have the strength to stand up to the military-industrial complex.
And then the next day, Gabbard is placed on the terror watch list.
What happened to Tulsi Gabbard this week was just extraordinary. And I don't see why there is not more outrage and indignation from every corner of our country.
And you think that came from the White House to spy on Tulsi Gabbard?
It clearly came from the White House, and it came the day after she criticized President Biden. She was put on a list called the Quiet Eyes list.
Yes, Tulsi Gabbard, who served her nation with honor and distinction, is placed on a terrorist watch list because she dared to criticize the head of the deep state, Kamala Harris. It's quite honestly shocking, and we need to clean house of all of these deep state thugs right now. And stop me if you've heard this before. Government's cracking down on social media posts and making arrests. Well, yes, we've heard about it happening, of course, in the UK and parts of Europe. And now it is coming to Canada, where we're seeing the Royal Canadian Mounted Police arresting social media users for discriminatory and racially offensive posts. Yes, Canada now will arrest you over your social media posts. Let's dive more deeply into the tyranny that is Trudeau's government up there in Canada with David Creighton, journalist, independent journalist who writes at the Post-Millennial and who has the great YouTube channel as well, Creighton's Right. David, so it's come to Canada now. I guess we were predicting this for a while, right?
As you know, Clayton, the Online Harms Act is being voted on perhaps next year. And this is the horrible censorship law that contains the thought crimes component. But it's not law yet. So why are the RCMP showing up at a woman's door in Chilliwack and saying, hey, we're going to arrest you for racially offensive tweets or racially offensive posts or racially offensive anything on the internet? Because this happened exactly at the same time as these so-called keyboard warriors, as these idiot judges are calling them in the UK. I mean, they're arresting people in the UK for saying things contrary to government policy, and the cops are literally showing up in their bedrooms, in their living rooms, carting them away to jail. You've seen the video of this. You've shown the video of this on Redacted. It's shocking. I mean, people in their 60s and 70s being arrested for these so-called Facebook crimes, and these cops coming around and just carting them off to jail. And it's happening now in Canada. We haven't even got the Online Harms Act passed yet. And this is absolutely frightening, because what's happening in UK is no longer a parliamentary democracy. It's a dictatorship. It's a totalitarian society envisioned by George Orwell, because you have to remember 1984 takes place in a futuristic society in Great Britain. It's become that society now. And my God, it's coming to Canada now. I don't want the RCMP coming to my door and giving their opinion on anything, especially about what I'm putting on the internet. And a lot of people are saying, enough is enough of this. And they haven't even got the law behind them.
Right. So they don't even have the law behind them. Then what's the impetus here? Like what does she say that's so offensive that rises to some level? We don't even have a law behind it. They're just taking it upon themselves to show. We've seen the video in the United States, the FBI doing the same thing in the United States, people making social media posts on Facebook, and the FBI showing up and knocking on people's door. And people are saying, get out of my yard. Get off my lawn right now. You're here. We literally have the largest child trafficking operation in the world, and you're worried about my Facebook posts?
Yeah, well, that's it. This woman actually isn't the nicest example of a free speech advocate. I'm not here to justify anything she said. Some of it is a little bit offensive, but free speech can be offensive. And I don't want the cops judging what's...
Hold on. Let's make the point here. The reason we have free speech is for the speech that you don't like, right? That is what is protected, protected speech. It's the speech you don't like. And so we always have to remember that. Like, things are offensive. People are going to be offended, but it should be protected, at least in the United States. That's why we have the First Amendment.
Well, we have a Charter of Rights, too, in Canada, which should be protecting our free speech. That, of course, is a huge gap in the United Kingdom. They don't have a Charter of Rights or a Bill of Rights or even a Constitution. They have nothing to go back on except protocol and the fair play of Parliament. So that's why they're getting away with murder in the UK. But my God, it should not be happening in countries where they have a constitution and Charter of Rights. But it is happening here. And of course, the anti-free speech advocates will always go after the weakest link first, the most obnoxious, the most critical,
offensive.
They will do that first and then start going after you and I. Because once they have gone after the weakest link, then they think it's open season on everybody else. They're just trying here to set precedents, is all this is about, so they can then start arresting other people. And this is absolutely out of line, completely out of line.
So they've corrupted our courts, whether that's overt corruption, whether it's the debasement of juries, which you're aware of the debasement of juries, which happened in '67. So it's no longer unanimous. You can have 2 people out of 12 say that you're innocent, and you can still be locked up.
Yep.
You've got non-British people sitting on juries.
To be honest, but the jury trial is the best chance you've got. But they know so much information on profiling now that they can select a jury to give a decision, can't they? Mm. Because they have so much information they've collected on individuals that they can profile them to favour a certain decision. And all the barrels. Now, I think we're still in a situation where not every apple in the barrel is rotten. But the apples at the top of all the institutional barrels are rotten. And any apple that wants to rise to the top of the barrel has to be rotted. And so we've got to take the top off all the barrels. That's where we are now.
These are the same people who created this idea, that the extremists and the Al-Qaeda, will put them on Gitmo and all that kind of thing. But now the citizens of the United States are supposed to be stripped of those rights. And so that we can be kind of put in our own little personal Gitmos and the digital concentration camp and things of this nature. So now the domestic terror bill takes its aim, kind of directly from taking its cue from the 9/11 domestic terror acts. And, so now they're changing the Arab terrorist extremist into the citizen of the United States. Now a United States citizen, boom, forget it. You are Al-Qaeda. And, so that gives them the ability to do all these illegal searches that I referred to earlier. This is really Those people that were engaged in those searches have to be prosecuted. The Senate Intelligence Committee needs to stop all the work that they're doing, including the phony UAP threat briefings and all that, and say, who are those people that were facilitating those types of illegal searches of United States citizens? And that's what needs to be prosecuted and move forward. And then when you do that, you're going to reveal the house of cards that's trying to push this domestic terror bill. So it's actually a race between, can people get the knowledge in time around who's been going into their private data from the CDC and from the FBI? And can we prosecute those people before the domestic terrorism thing gets thrown into law, because you have the Democrats running it, and the Democrats have gone completely insane. Now,
well, there's a very long answer to what Palantir is and a short answer, and I'd like to give you both, but we'll start off with the short answer. Essentially, Palantir is the CIA-funded company that labels Americans based on their online activity as subversives for the CIA. So it's poised to have a major role at the center of the coming war on domestic terror. And if you're familiar with how the war on domestic terror has developed across the several last administrations, really since the creation of DHS under the George W. Bush administration, the framework for the war on domestic terror, including that released by the Biden administration a few years ago, makes it very clear that the war on domestic terror is meant to target dissent on the left as well as the right, namely Americans who protest perceived government overreach or who oppose any forms of capitalism, including stakeholder capitalism. The favor for it of capitalism of the World Economic Forum, for example. And unfortunately, this was an agenda that was launched not just by, or that has been advanced, not just by the Biden administration, but the Trump administration as well, and the Obama administration before that, and of course, the Bush administration before that. It's a bipartisan agenda.
Uniparty.
And Palantir
the Uniparty.
Exactly. And Palantir has advanced it has just been the contractor of choice for that across every administration. It doesn't matter if it's Republican or Democrat. So one example I would give on the other side of things, the Democrat side, is that people may know that Biden's top intelligence official since he came to office is Avril Haines, who was John Brennan's deputy at the CIA under the Obama administration, and also a figure in the Event 201 a pandemic simulation in 2019. And Avril Haines is also a longtime consultant to Palantir, right? So they actively cultivate powerful people on both sides of the political aisle. And while Peter Thiel, is definitely, it frames himself as right-leaning or libertarian, his co-founder at Palantir and the current CEO, Alex Karp, often brags about stopping the rise of the quote-unquote far right in Europe, and has described that a lot of his decisions at the company at Palantir are propelled by a deep-seated fear that he's going to be murdered by Christian conservatives in the United States. So this is definitely a company that goes across both sides and is part of this bipartisan agenda to target both left and right. And so as far as the long answer goes, it's important to understand the history of Palantir and where it came from. It's really the privatization of a mass surveillance apparatus that was developed by the Bush and Reagan neocons going back to the 1980s. Some people that are familiar with the Iran-Contra scandal of the 1980s, and particularly those hearings, there was a question asked by a senator or congressman, I can't remember who, about the continuity of government protocols to Oliver North, and the hearing was subsequently shut down, preventing North from even having to answer the question or even say no comment or plead the fifth or anything like that. And essentially, the continuity of government protocols involved a database of Americans that was called MainCore that was developed with the Promise software. And what MainCore was a database of Americans who were deemed unfriendly by the federal government and could be incarcerated at a time of national crisis. And according to the documentation of what could be, considered a national crisis, internal unrest, mass dissent, nonviolent dissent, mind you, against a U.S. military intervention abroad. So a massive nonviolent protest, for example, against the U.S. invasion of a foreign country, for example, could trigger this. Among many other things, a pandemic, a financial crisis. Because remember, in the 2008 financial crisis, there were talks of imposing martial law on the United States. So this database actually never went away. It was seen being used during September 11th, 2001 in the White House. The last time it was reported by mainstream media was in a now defunct outlet called Radar. And at that time in 2008, 3 million Americans were on the list. Americans do not know if they are on the list, but presumably it still exists. And Palantir, since it was created, has been one of the, is essentially the software that determines if you are on that list or not. For the government, because it is a data mining firm, or it provides software that turns these masses of data that the NSA and all these other intelligence agencies, all this data that it sucks up on Americans through this warrantless surveillance program, it turns all of that into actionable intelligence and basically essentially profiles Americans. And this particular group that developed Main Core, after 9/11 happened, they tried in direct conjunction with the CIA, created a program that was later scrapped, defunded by Congress, called Total Information Awareness. And Total Information Awareness was going to be read by the man that's been considered the godfather of modern surveillance, John Poindexter, best known for being Reagan's national security advisor during Iran-Contra, and the person that was found guilty of who was charged in connection with Iran-Contra, the highest ranking member of the Reagan administration. And so he was going to be in charge of this program that was going to, again, the whole ethos of it was to prevent terrorist attacks, pandemics, bioterrorism events before they can happen. So this is in the wake, again, of 9/11 and the anthrax attacks of 2001. And essentially what they were hoping to do was get all this data, not just of like what Americans were doing online, but their shopping habits, what they were buying, what they were spending their money on, and their healthcare data. And over time, Palantir has essentially become all of that. And that's why we saw during COVID-19, particularly during the Trump administration, became the contractor of choice for harvesting and analyzing COVID-19 health data, and was also it was also used by Operation Warp Speed to determine which priority populations were going to get which vaccines and how many. And a lot of that data involves sensitive health data of Americans, demographic data, and I argued in a series I did at the time called Warp Speed and Race that it was particularly motivated to target minority communities at that point in time with the COVID-19 vaccine. So Palantir is really a company that a lot of people need to know a lot more about. And it's very unsettling, in my opinion, that it's directly donating so much money to the Trump campaign, and that two of its co-founders are also doing that. And Palantir, again, is not the only unsettling teal-backed company that is involved with essentially developing this pre-crime apparatus. In addition, when Palantir was first created, they were created with funding from InQtel, the CIA's venture capital arm, and their only client until 2008 was the CIA. And according to CEO Alex Karp, the CIA was always the intended client of Palantir. Their engineers made over 200 visits to Langley CIA headquarters in their first few years as a company. So the ties with the CIA and Palantir are really as deep as you can get.
So a lot of Americans probably have no idea about this. Those hardworking Americans who go out to a Trump rally, who think that, get your government out of my life, do not tread on me, don't tell me what to do, don't realize that a lot of the money that's flowing into the Republican Party is coming from an apparatus which wants to spy on them, which actually thinks a lot of these Trump supporters, these MAGA supporters who've been labeled as subversives, and they think, oh, Trump's going to protect us from that. No, there's a lot of money actually flowing into the Republican Party from an apparatus which actually believes they are bad people, essentially, right? They're actually supporting an apparatus which actually labels them as subversives. Am I wrong about that?
You're not, actually. One of these Teal-funded and backed companies that's become a military intelligence contractor, like Clearview AI, which has scraped photos of essentially everyone in the world off of the internet, most of it off of Facebook, which again would not exist without the early investment of Peter Thiel. They brag about their role in identifying people that were present at January 6th and helping law enforcement prosecute people who were there. all of whom, of course, are Trump supporters. And after January 6th, they saw a 26% uptake of their services by law enforcement, and used it as a selling point, the fact that they were able to identify Trump supporters so quickly based on their facial recognition database.
This is unbelievable to me. So literally there's support. I mean, yes. So they're really supporting the people that are hurting them. I mean, the Trump supporters should...
I would argue, yes.
They should be demanding from President Trump. And this is the thing. I don't know if President Trump even knows this. I mean, this is such a nuanced discussion here. I'm not sure that he's even maybe aware of this. Maybe we should give him the benefit of the doubt in this. I mean, I don't know how much he knows about the inner workings of Palantir and Peter Thiel. And maybe Trump supporters should demand that President Trump, say, well, I don't want your money. Keep this out. This is exactly hurting the very people that I'm standing here trying to support, maybe, right? I mean, I don't know. You tell me.
Well, I'm not going to comment on what President Trump or former President Trump does or does not know. I'm obviously not privy to that information. But what I will say, and the reason I brought up total information awareness earlier, is because Bush era neocons, namely Richard Pearl, one of the architects of the Iraq War, who served in the Bush Department of Defense and who has extremely close ties to Benjamin Netanyahu, for example, he is the person that helped connect Peter Thiel and Alex Karp as they were creating Palantir with John Poindexter, with the explicit purpose of recreating total information awareness as a private enterprise. And since then, the people that have backed that have been the establishment wings of both parties. So regardless of whether Trump knows or he doesn't, there's certainly people around him or who are likely to be in his cabinet that are aware of what Palantir does, because it's a very old agenda that, here I point out how it goes back to the Reagan-Bush era. But you could really make an argument, as Yasha Levine does in his book Surveillance Valley, that the internet's earliest days, going back to when it was a military project called ARPANET, were about counterinsurgency and identifying people who might be a threat to the status quo through their activity on this particular network and through data mining. Which is something to be considered, because if you look back at, the policy of domestic terror, for example, during the Clinton administration, there was a focus on veterans, a focus on militias. In general, the domestic terror apparatus tends to be pointed at Americans who care about the Constitution, who care about reining in the surveillance state, who care about preventing tyranny, who care about ensuring privacy and freedom for not just for themselves, but for future generations. And, by and large, a lot of that tends to fall sort of in right-leaning segments of the population. And I think people should be very unsettled by this, especially when you consider that Peter Thiel is one of the main investors in Rumble, for example. How does Rumble use user data? Does this surveillance apparatus that includes Palantir profile people that use Rumble? It's very possible, if they have a financial incentive to do so, through Peter Thiel. And I think it would be nice to ask clarity from Rumble leadership if they provide user data to U.S. intelligence or if they sell it in any capacity, because also U.S. intelligence doesn't just take it illegally, they also buy our data. Because data is, the main commodity of the modern world. A lot of people have been saying for a few years that data is the new oil. And one of the reasons our intelligence services want all of this data on us so badly is to profile us, which again is precisely what Palantir does for them. And again, they claim that they prevent terror attacks before they happen and all of this crime before it happens. But Palantir is also a pioneer of what they call predictive policing, which is essentially pre-crime. And pre-crime is something that was actually legalized under the Trump administration. It was Attorney General William Barr who created a program at the DOJ called DEEP. Which is an early engagement program, they say, for people who are believed to be mobilizing toward violence. And this all came in the wake of the El Paso Walmart shooting. I think that was 2019 or so. And at that time, then President Trump demanded, or rather called for, big tech companies to develop software to identify shooters before they could commit, mass shootings. And he actually considered a proposal that was brought to him by his friend, former president of NBC Universal, Bob Wright, and was lobbied to him heavily by his own daughter, Ivanka Trump. For a agency called HARPA, which Biden actually created, but they call it ARPA-H. And the flagship program of HARPA was to be this program called Safe Homes, where they would monitor not just Americans' social media data, but also data sucked up by Fitbits, Apple TVs, the Alexa device from Amazon, all of these things in your home, and use that, run it through an AI algorithm and determine if you show any early warning signs of neuropsychiatric violence, with the potential to have you go and attend sessions with a court-ordered physician, and could also lead to your house arrest. All sorts of things were under this proposal. And Trump was allegedly sold on it, according to reports at the time, but it didn't actually end up materializing. Maybe he, someone talked some sense into him, but it certainly wasn't Ivanka Trump, who was the biggest lobbyist for this in his administration. But given the outsized role we're seeing now from Palantir and big tech in funding his campaign, I think there's definite cause for concern there that something like that could resurrect itself, especially considering that a lot of money has been put into this pre-crime apparatus. And actually, there's another company that Peter Thiel funded that's involved with developing this pre-crime system in the United States, by actually taking over county by county the nation's 911 emergency call systems. This is an Israeli founded company called Carbine 911. That was nominally headed for a long time by Ehud Barak, the former Israeli prime minister. Jeffrey Epstein funded it with $1 million. Allegedly, Leslie Wexner, his biggest patron, did as well. And it used to have, until the Epstein connection to the company was reported, had the former head of Israeli intelligence unit 8200 on its board of directors. Another Epstein associate named Nicole Junkerman used to be on the board, among others. And they have since left, but other people have joined the board, like former head of DHS under Trump, Christian Nielsen, as well as Michael Chertoff. And Peter Thiel's Founders Fund gave a significant amount of money to this company as well. And so a close Thiel associate who served in the transition team, particularly for the Pentagon of the Trump administration the first time, Trace Stevens, has also served on its board, including when it was openly affiliated with Israeli intelligence and to the present as well. And Carbine 911, what it does.
Can I just ask you, because this past week, USA Today reported that we've had now 8 major outages of the 911 network in the United States. This is a huge concern. I mean, as we head into this election, a lot of people saying, well, could we see some sort of, big national emergency? And now 911 networks are going down across the United States, as the USA Today reported this past week. So
yes.
Is this like an effort for them to say, hey, your 911 network is down? Well, we have the perfect solution for you. It's an Israeli-backed 911 network.
That is essentially what is happening. And it's actually been in the works for several years. For several years now, there has been a lobbying effort to replace the current 911 call center system in the U.S., which is decentralized and, more or less based on each county, to make it a new national federal system called Next Generation, or NG 911. And Carbine 911, since it was created, has become extremely close with the main lobbying group for NG 911 and is slated to be the vendor of choice if and when legislation for Next Generation 911 is pushed through. And again, with major people in DHS, major people with ties not just to the Trump administration, but to Peter Thiel's Founders Fund, and also another Thiel-backed military contractor now building the virtual border wall on the U.S.-Mexico border, Anduril. It's very likely that Carbine 911 would be slated for, preferential treatment going forward. But what's the problem with Carbine 911? Well, according to earlier reports, before they sort of scrubbed major aspects of their website after their connection to Jeffrey Epstein was made public, when you call a 911 call center running Carbine on a smartphone, it can harvest pretty much everything you have on your phone off of it and store it on their database. And they use that database not just to, assess what is going on in the moment or whatever, but they can also use whatever data points they find relevant on your phone to determine, to feed into an algorithm that determines where crime may happen in the future and what crime hotspots may emerge over the coming weeks or months, right? So this is essentially another component of the pre-crime system. And Carbine has also talked about how they plan to be functional in smart cities, where in the future, people won't be calling 911 smart devices on the street, like street lights and other, facial recognition cameras and things like that would be able to notify 911 without a human even being involved in calling and reporting an emergency. So this is a very Orwellian company. Obviously, the people funding it, in my opinion, probably are not to be trusted if you consider what I said earlier about Peter Thiel's involvement with Palantir, his efforts to privatize TIA, and then later create Facebook, which was essentially launched the same day that another DARPA program called LifeLog that does exactly what Facebook does was shut down. And then Facebook comes back in its place, and its first major investor that puts it on the map is Peter Thiel, and it's collected all of this data about our lives that it shares with our government. And also, it's just complete madness. All these people have been building a panopticon, and we've been freely giving them our data for a very, very long time. And they've been using it to profile us. And this is why, personally, it irks me a lot when people try and say that Peter Thiel is a libertarian. Certainly he claims that publicly in his speeches and books, says certain things. But if you look at his actions and what he has done, creating a tool like Palantir for the federal government is literally the least libertarian thing you could do. Nothing empowers the worst aspects of the state more than a company like Palantir. And
you have to imagine all of these Trump supporters who were at the rally on Saturday in Butler, Pennsylvania. It's curious to me how many of those Trump supporters were there who, when they were filing their emails back and forth and getting their information about arriving at the rally, no bags, or here's the list of information from the Trump campaign. How many of those people have been profiled and are now in a database that is backed by Palantir in some capacity, and they have no idea that they're probably labeled as such? And it's mind-boggling to me. So all of these Trump supporters go in to support President Trump. They don't realize that in the back end, the money that's flowing in has been monitoring them and surveilling them and basically labeling them as subversives to the United States.
Yeah, well, again, we don't know the metrics that the Palantir or intelligence agencies use to determine who is a subversive and who isn't. But if in 2008 it had 3 million Americans on it, I can assure you that now in 2024 it is much larger, considering the amount of data that has been sucked up since then and everything that has happened in this country since that time. And so what really concerns me here is that people, again, are believing that this is, Trump is poised to fight the deep state in his second term, but why is he inviting these people in as donors? And not only that, considering people like Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan, who helped fleece Americans' wealth during the 2008 financial crisis, and have him be Treasury Secretary. The fact that he would even consider that is frankly very disturbing. And, I think, again, part of it goes back to efforts to sort of define the deep state as a Democrat-only entity. But again, the deep state refers to, at least in my opinion, the unelected officials that serve between administrations in the government, and, sort of like the unelected bureaucracy. And, as we've seen, throughout American history, they run every administration, whether it's Democrat or Republican. And in the case of Trump, he had a first term. We can see what his policy record was. Did he stand up to the deep state on things like COVID or mass shootings or red flag laws and things like that? And I think people should go back and consider the policies and not get so wrapped up in the momentum, perhaps, of political campaigns, because political campaigns are sales pitches. But as we've seen throughout American history, presidents do not keep their campaign promises. If they do, they keep very few. Unfortunately, the stakes are very high in this country. I don't think people can really continue to vote for the lesser of two evils indefinitely when they ultimately are beholden to this same system that is building this bipartisan surveillance state. And what especially concerns me, too, is that some of Trump's rhetoric on the campaign trail this time around is him calling for things like a biometric U.S. entry-exit system. So you'll have to scan your face to either cross the border or fly into an airport or travel internationally. And this is actually something that comes from the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or Agenda 2030. And that's why it's being rolled out across the world in South America, the EU, the UK, between this year and next year. So why is he promoting that? Why are campaign lawyers of his promoting the idea of using biometric digital ID to vote? Why can't we use physical IDs? to vote? Do we really need to give in to the digital agenda to save, to resolve these problems in the United States? I don't really think that's true. And I think, again, this speaks to the influence of big tech on our politics. Keep in mind also that, one of the main big tech barons behind Biden is Eric Schmidt. And Eric Schmidt serves on the steering committee of Bilderberg alongside Peter Thiel. And Bilderberg is a closed-door globalist meeting where people like the chairman of the World Economic Forum and all of these people come together to chart out essentially the course of global events over the following year. You have Peter Thiel, a Republican donor, and Eric Schmidt, a Democrat donor, all on the steering committee. And according to a 2019 Newsweek article, they're the most influential people there, Thiel and Schmidt. So again, the Uniparty agrees on a lot more than it does not. And I think we should look at this surveillance agenda very seriously. And, maybe this information is unsettling for people, as it rightly should be. But the answer to this is very simple. We need to start starving these big tech barons of our data and stop letting them harvest our stuff. And also, you let them manipulate us through the psychological operations we know they're conducting online, because the deep state, right? The military and intelligence communities are on record have been funding have been put millions of dollars into using bots and other tools to manipulate online discourse. One U.S. Air Force proposal for that exact purpose said that they were researching in 2014 how to use social media to control people like drones, like unmanned drones, right? So, this is the type of research that the deep state has been putting in to manipulating Americans' behavior online. And if, the deep state doesn't like Americans that want to protest against government overreach or want to protect the Constitution, people should be very vigilant, not just about how their data is being used and what they're saying online, but, pretty much every interaction they have, with the online space, including how information they consume impacts them. Keep in mind that Elon Musk is a Pentagon contractor. Would he tell the Pentagon that they can't use the tools they've developed for PSYOPs over the past several years that they've poured millions and millions of dollars into? Would he tell them no when he also relies on Pentagon contracts for the success of his company, SpaceX, for example? I think these questions should be asked, quite frankly. And, not that I want to tell people not to follow news between now and November, but I think, whoever wants to feel more sane between now and November, you might want to be responsible about the information you consume and how much time you're spending online. And it's also possible, again, to cultivate a news feed without using social media. A lot of people have forgotten about RSS feeds. You can put in the websites or URLs of your favorite sites and shows like Redacted, and build your own newsfeed that social media cannot manipulate. And that may be something very important to rely on as we get closer to November. But again, I've been ranting for a while. Sorry.
No, that's what I do. I use an app on my iPad, my Mac called Reader, and it's an RSS reader. And I'm subscribed to specific news sources that I know are not part of the deep state agenda, and who I can get reliable information from, like Unlimited Hangout, your website, and others. And I read it every day. And I think if people are just like tuning into Apple News or Google News, or they get their sources like from Yahoo News, CNN, etc., they're of course being fed a steady stream of propaganda.
This story just hit. CDC tracked millions of phones to see if Americans followed COVID lockdown orders. Totally illegal action. Newly released documents showed the CDC planned to use phone location data to monitor schools and churches, and wanted to use the data for many non-COVID-19 purposes too. In other words, we have the cover of the COVID op, we get all the data, and then we use it for something else to track you for other purposes. For example, to put you on a domestic terrorism hit list. So that story is being widely covered now in the media. There's just no way of getting around it. Right on its heels, the FBI conducted millions of warrantless searches of Americans' data in 2021. So the CDC, one government agency overreach. Number two, the FBI. There's another one. So what's going on here? These are all illegal, unconstitutional searches of our information, and yet no heads are rolling. Nobody's being arrested. There's no cases for it. There's not even a hearing about this. This is pretty major action. And now we have to wonder, and here's where we're going to get into it, what is it exactly that they're looking for in this data? I think a lot of it comes down to who is going to give them a problem, because what we're seeing across the board with the deep state takeover of these different countries is they're using people who have very low popularity. Just look at Stepford Biden, for example. He's 29% in the polls that favor him. Okay, those are Democratic polls. And Justin Trudeau, somewhere around 22%. These people with those types of majorities can't really rule. They can't govern. It's impossible if you have 20% of the vote to be able to do that. So they're going to need to rely on emergency powers, and they get most of that through the continuity of government action of September 11th. The September 11th action for emergency, which we're still under that emergency, as hard as that is to believe, we're still cooked completely in that exact same situation. Even though we've gotten Republican presidents through their Democratic presidents, you've had Obama. Everyone said, hey, Obama's going to get rid of that for sure. No, he doubled down on it. And every year when they signed the NDAA, which is the National Defense Authorization Act, boom, there we get all that money again, $800 billion. As long as you have that emergency signature attached, you're going to get that money. And that's the way it goes, whether it's Trump, Obama, or Bush, or Stepford Biden. So they're all on board with that. And you have to ask why? Well, because when government gets that kind of ruling authority, they don't like to give it up. So now all of these bills for domestic terrorism that we're seeing that are being pushed so heavily by the government and the Biden administration are all coming out of the Department of Homeland Security. Well, the Department of Homeland Security went from 10,000 employees to 250,000 today. That's 250,000 people. Think about it. First of all, that's an extra constitutional agency as well, right off the bat. And not to mention the fact that the Department of Homeland Security, their original designation was to prevent terrorists from entering the country and protect the homeland. And a lot of the idea was to change America from the United States to the homeland and then assign it a different constitution and use a number of different types of techniques, legal techniques, to accomplish this. So we're finding ourselves right in the middle of that maelstrom. And here we are 20 years or so after the September 11th attacks, and these guys are ready. All the same rules that they rolled out to prosecute extreme Muslims, Muslim terrorists and extremists, and all the unconstitutional warrantless wiretapping and all that are now trying to codify those into law as they distract us with this hysterical stuff on the side. The question is, are we going to go for that, or are we going to call it out? And one of the ways we can call it out is by going after two central essential bills.
Okay, so, today there have been more stabbings. There was another stabbing in London today. 2 days ago, there was a woman and some children also stabbed just outside Manchester. These things aren't being reported properly by the media. They're more interested on talking about people who have posted hurty words on social media and are fast-tracking these people into jail within 24 hours. Some of these are OAPs, old age pensioners, sort of in their 60s, in their 70s, no previous record. They are going through the criminal justice system, the two-tier justice system that we now have in the UK, and they are in jail within 24 hours. The problem here is that the prisons are already overpopulated in the UK, and now we have a one-in, one-out system. Operation Early Dawn, I believe it's now called. So if you're a rapist, if you're a murderer, if you're a robber, you could get let out of jail early because somebody has said something that somebody deems offensive online, which to me is just absolute madness.
Well, we have a saying on this show that conspiracy theories are just 6-month spoiler alerts for what's to come. And there's no shame in raising these questions. So here's one for you. With over 30 million, upwards of 43 million illegal immigrants that have poured across the border during Biden's presidency. And the federal government is building massive facilities that can sleep tens of thousands of individuals all across the country. You probably haven't heard about these large facilities, have you? Well, why are they being built? Who are they for? We might finally have an answer. Listen.
It's not for these illegals, especially let's go off the numbers that they're telling us that there really are. They're saying, 11 million? In reality, I can tell you right now with talking to all of the agents that I've talked to, private sector, looking at the cameras and all the real data, we're over 30 plus million who've actually entered this country.
Yep.
And so even with that, even though that's enough to replace about 36 states population, why would they need to continue to do that if they're trying to absorb these guys, make them productive members of our society, get them into housing, because we know that there are already housing projects being coordinated with builders, again, with our money. I believe it's to kind of like what Nazis did with the Jews, concentration camps, processing facilities. They're going to need somewhere to process the dissidents.
So it's not for illegal immigrants. Who is it for? Dissidents? We're going to unpack this with former 24-year veteran of the Customs and Border Protection, J.J. Carroll, who did this interview as part of his new documentary, Treason, scouring the country right now. And you just keep bringing unbelievable revelation after unbelievable revelation as part of this story. And I think, again, most Americans have no idea what is going on, and it's being absolutely kept from the American people right now. And JJ joins us once again here on the show. Great to see you. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me, Clayton. And thank you for talking about this documentary, because as I travel the nation, I have I believe I'm an expert on this topic. However, when you talk to people, and I have interviewed multiple people from all different levels of ability to get intelligence gathering data, it's fascinating to me and shocking at the same time when I speak to people that are very compartmentalized, meaning they focus on child sex trafficking. They talk about the gang members. They talk about facilities, and you get deep in that rabbit hole. Really, it's a rabbit hole. You're like, I didn't know it was this deep. I didn't know it was this broad. I didn't know it was this malicious. And you played this clip from someone I interviewed this past weekend. Her name is Christy Hutcherson, and she runs an organization called Women Fighting for America. But her background was federal contracting, and more specifically, abroad, but specifically, she worked on forward operation bases, FOBs, in military war zones, where she would put up these giant soft-sided facilities, water, food, et cetera, et cetera. So we're talking tens of millions, if not billions of dollars, right, that have transferred from her company, which she no longer is a part of. But she has access to all the bid contracts. So I'm interviewing her, and like I said, I have a very good understanding of what the hell's going on in America under this immigration invasion. But when I speak to people that are very dialed in on very specific areas, I'm shocked. And she tells me, and I didn't know this because I don't have access to it. She has access to the federal database where you can go on a website and there are endless bids for contracts from whatever. But she's focusing in on, she says to me, there's bids for detention facilities being built in all 50 states in America. And I said, okay, hold on a second. Say that again. She says, okay, I can go into a database because my company used to bid on all this. And I bid overseas, international contracts. Very, very intelligent woman, very, very connected. And she says, I go in the database, JJ, and there's detention facility bids to build individual detention facilities in every state in the union. And then she goes on to say to me, well, JJ, who do you think they're built for? Are they built for all the illegal aliens or the unaccompanied alien children? Of course not. And she has a point, right? Because
you would think, right? So that's where I was confused. I would have thought, okay, they're building all of these detention facilities across the United States for a purpose, illegal immigrants. But no, right? Because as your data has suggested, most of these ICE facilities, right? Can you talk about that, are completely empty?
Yes. Well, they are completely empty. I talked to my buddies in Texas and in San Diego, and I talked to my ICE supervisors, and they tell me, JJ, they're empty. So you're talking anywhere from 30 to 40,000 beds across America, mainly on the southern border, right, are empty. Well, why are they empty? Because we have massive catch and release. Let me explain what this looks like. in the old days, right? The old days, Clayton, 3.5 years ago, not 30 years ago, when I got someone that was special interest alien, deported felon, whatever, I didn't release them. I sent them to an ICE holding facility, and they went and they waited there a week, 2 weeks, a month, whatever it was, to go in front of the judge, find deported, or found to be guilty of reentering as a felon. Then they spent time in federal prison, and then they would be deported. So we had all this bed space. But now, if I get someone that's a deported felon, I know this is going to be hard for people to believe. I arrest someone that's a deported felon now, I'm releasing them. I'm releasing them on the street. So you go from arresting people 3 years ago, setting up for deportation and prosecution, goes to, we call it camp, a camp space in an ICE facility, and then that individual goes through the court system and then is ultimately deported after he or she serves her time. Not now. Everyone gets arrested by the Border Patrol. They quickly vet them, and then release them. Just release them. We just had 8, I'm going to mispronounce it, Kyrgyzstanians, 8 of them that crossed the border, were vetted and released. Now we find out they were actually ISIS terrorists. ICE had to go find them. All 8 of them, I believe, entered together, but all 8 of them didn't stay together. They went to Los Angeles, Philadelphia, and New York. So what Ms. Hutcherson is saying is, in coordination with what I know, is you have 40,000 beds. Why would you need more? Mayorkas continues to go in front of Congress and demanding, I need more money for ICE beds. And they say to him, sir, you have no one in them. I'll give you an example. San Diego sector has like a 2,000 bed, soft-sided, hard-sided facility. The last I checked was 6 people in there.
People better wake up. People better wake up. I mean, he's before Clay, Congress. He's sitting before Congress demanding more money from Congress to build more beds. And they've been built, and they're all empty. They're all empty. Yes. I mean,
because we don't hold people anymore.
It's a good thing your documentary is called Treason, because this is treason. I mean, this is exactly what this is. What money does he need? And then what are these detention facilities being built for, as she was talking about, in all 50 states? I mean, we're talking millions of beds across the United States. For whom?
Yeah, well, and she says in this interview, they're for dissidents, American dissidents. And she's right, because I know how that sounds, Clayton. I know when I say this out loud, like you and I talked about this before, I have an inner voice and I'm like, oh God, I got to say this out loud. But it's true. So if I'm telling you that our federal government is building detention facilities across America, and therefore people that dissent, meaning people don't want vaccines, people that are J6ers, people that are creating militias, and you go, oh, JJ, you're insane. And I push back to you. Let's go back 20 years to present day. Are you telling me this is more insane right now, what I'm talking about, than if I told you prior to 9/11, someone's going to fly planes into a building, they're going to fall down, no one's going to believe it, then we're going to use weapons of mass destruction, we're going to go into the Middle East, we're going to be in a war for over 20 years, we're going to spend $4 trillion, thousands of men and women are going to die, American soldiers, tens of thousands are going to be brutalized in their brain and physically destroyed with limbs and burns. The government's going to create a bioweapon. Our government, with China, is going to release it onto America and the world. Then they're going to lie to us and not tell us where it went. Then they're going to make us wear masks, stand 6 feet apart. They make this out of whole cloth. Then they're going to admit to it, and then they're going to force us all to get vaccines, and millions of people are dying or being injured by that vaccine. Then I'm going to use another one. I'm going to go in front of Congress. I'm going to tell you that the border's secure, as video of millions of people are coming across. I just laid out 3 insane scenarios, and you're telling me that this is more crazy than those 3 that I told you?
I mean, JJ, you're nowhere near as crazy as I am. I could give you a list of 20 right now that we cover on our show.
Yes.
You want to go back to the Oklahoma City bombing? I mean, I could go on and on and on for the level of lies that our government has told us and put forth a public narrative, and behind the scenes, they're crafting something incredibly nefarious right now. I mean, it doesn't sound crazy to me at all. And I think You have large militias that are coming together across the United States right now who are preparing. I mean, we've been covering this on the show. I mean, we're talking 80, 100,000 Americans who are preparing right now for what's coming. So they're building these large facilities. Can you speak to some of the specifics of these facilities and who's facilitating this? Is this Department of Homeland Security? Is it Department of Defense? Is it NGOs with the help of with Mayorkas at the Department of Homeland Security? How is this coming together? What do these facilities look like?
I think they're going to look like just the facilities that we're seeing where the children are being held in, those FEMA camps. That's what they're building. They're building FEMA camps. The way she explained it to me was like the way she set up, her company would set up forward operation bases in military zones where they'd go in, barbed wire fences, soft-sided, those big white tents that come across. We see the videos. We see it in Hollywood movies where you can put 5, 10, 15,000 people in and just jam them into quarters.
And I should point out, to your point, she's not making this up. This was her job, and she's seeing the bids coming through in the contracts. So this is not fantasy.
No, this is not. This might happen. This is happening. Now we come to the crossroads. Do you believe that your federal government has your best interest? It's simple as that. Do you believe our government is malicious and nefarious? Look what they're doing to January 6ers. Look at that. But think of on a massive scale. We don't have to go back far in history. They interned Japanese Americans in camps. So you're telling me this government, the government that's been lying to you for decades, is now all going to be kumbaya and they found God and they're going to do righteous things? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? They locked you in your houses for months on some BS COVID stuff, right? COVID was real, but they locked you in your houses. What happens when we rise up and go, I'm not staying in my houses? Oh, you're not? National Guard, martial law, round them up. So I have a woman that I think is highly intelligent, very, very successful, has made a lot of money in her business, and now is devoting her life to fighting the federal government and exposing the truth. And she's telling me, JJ, this is for dissidents. When I talk to experts, and then I fact check that expert, and I talk to other experts, and they validate, I cannot logically listen to someone like that and then dismiss her. No, you don't know what you're talking about. No, she obviously knows what the hell she's talking about, Clayton. Look, the more I go on this journey, called me and Ryan Madden, my business partner on this documentary, called A Journey, I am absolutely shocked at what I learned. I send you stuff, right? As I come back, I send you and I tell you, Clayton, I know this is going to sound crazy. This is what I uncovered. I know it's bizarro world, but it is. I mean, this week I sat and talked to multiple people that have intimate access of child sex trafficking. So grotesque that I go home after these trips and I literally have to figure a way to decompress my brain from what I'm hearing.
What's amazing to me is you've been on the front lines for 24 years on the border. The stuff that you've seen is horrific, and the fact that you need to come home and decompress from what you're now hearing is incredibly disturbing.
Look, Clayton, I come home. Literally, this is how it goes. I spend 3 or 4 days filming, interviewing, going to areas, talking to whistleblowers, and when I'm flying home, I'm exhausted, but I'm so amped up because I'm trying to process what I learned and then trying to sift through and intellectually go through what I've been told and say, okay, is this true? Okay, how do I fact check this? And then, dear God, it is true. Okay, how am I going to articulate this to America? And then in my brain, I know that this is just a personal talking point, but I personally think, God, I have to go down this road again, right? I have to go on national TV or huge podcasts like yourself and say the crazy out loud, right? I have to say like I wrote it in my book, Invaded. I had to write crazy stuff, knowing that it was factually true and the data said this will happen down the line. And everything I wrote, everything I've been saying is factually true. I mean, Clayton, go back to, I think I've been talking to you for several months now. Go back to the things that you and I talked about 6 months ago. Everything that I've said has happened.
Right.
Outrageous stuff.
Right.
It's happened. The revelations have happened. Is there a race war in Chicago? Get ready. Yes. Now everybody acknowledges it. Everyone doesn't want to talk about sex trafficking. Now that you and I have talked about it, I see it everywhere. And it's not algorithms on my phone. I'm talking willy-nilly people that I would never expect to talk about are talking about it.
Finally.
Everything that I am saying to you has come factually true. So if I've told you 10 things that have come true or actually data proven truth, why would this be a lie?
Right.
Honestly, why would I come to your show and lie?
And we can see them. Here's the thing. We can see the tangible evidence of this. We can see the contracts.
Yes.
We can see them being built in all 50 states across the United States. And we're going to see what happens here. I think, we can go into speculative territory here, but we are entering a very dangerous election. And what is going to happen with this election in 2024? We've had Colonel McGregor on the show who believes we are heading, not even having an election. So what are these camps going to be for? If they're not for illegal immigrants, what are they being used for? And she says dissidents. I mean, keep it tuned right here. I mean, I really think that this is an eye-opening and terribly scary piece of this. I want our audience has been fantastic in this. You guys can pre-order JJ's documentary right now. Pre-order it. Support this. This is independent journalism of the best kind. All you need to do is go to thisistreason.com. We are not affiliated with it at all. I just believe in it wholeheartedly and I want to promote it. So you guys can pre-order the documentary right now to help support this journalism. Go to thisistreason.com, pre-order it, and it'll be out. Your goal is like sometime in the fall, right? Like September or October when it'll publish.
Yep.
So we'll make sure
First week in September.
Oh, great. So when that publishes, we'll make sure JJ is here, and we will promote the heck out of it. Hopefully this is one of the most eye-opening documentaries you will ever see. But please, guys, go pre-order this right now. JJ's doing incredible work along with Ryan as they uncover these stories, and we're able to bring them to you here and elevate them as much as we can. JJ has got to get on a flight right now. He's going to cover more of this right now, so we don't want to hold him up anymore. JJ, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it. This is an unbelievable story.
Thank you very much, Clayton, as always.
Well, our nation is being invaded by massive illegal gangs from other countries, and it's happening all across American suburbs. By the way, think this isn't coming to a town near you. Think again. For years on this show, we've been detailing illegal criminal gangs like MS-13 carrying out brutal attacks on Americans while the Biden administration refuses to deport these guys. Even going back to my time at Fox News Channel when I was an anchor at Fox News, we were covering MS-13 gangs and the horrible bloodshed that they were carrying out on Americans under President Obama's watch at the time. And come to a sanctuary city. ICE won't deport you. You can carry out brutal homicides. It doesn't matter because we won't even report you. And that's exactly what's happening. Cops won't even call ICE. Listen to a sanctuary city police officer explain how he let a double homicide killer walk free because, well, he was an illegal immigrant. We couldn't even call ICE.
We'll grab his information and see what we can do, but like I said, can you please collect the information?
He said that he's already illegal. He already said that he went to...
Okay, hold on, let's back up a little bit. First off, we're a sanctuary city. Even if he's legal here, we cannot call ICE.
Okay, but you still have to report that, right?
No, we don't, because it's a sanctuary city. We do not report illegal undocumented.
So you're going to let a person who went to prison, he committed a crime in America, who's illegal right now, you're going to let him go free right now to this elevator?
That's exactly what I'm saying, because we're a sanctuary city. I've arrested a double homicide suspect in this city before and let him walk out the door because we're a sanctuary city. We're not going to call ICE to come pick him up and deport him.
He came to pick up 320,000.
So he can stay here and continue the murdering. Basically.
I mean, you're hearing that from a police officer's mouth.
Right. Sanctuary for who? Not for you, sir, law-abiding citizen.
Yeah, I mean, if I go to a church, like it's, if I go to a church, I declare sanctuary and they grant sanctuary, I can't start killing the bishops. And they're like, nope, sorry, we're good. Can't do anything about it.
In New York City, I suppose you could.
Well, in New York City, take a look at this. It's exactly what you can do because we now know, according to the New York Post, 3 out of 4 arrested in Midtown are migrant crimes. They're immigrant crimes. 3 out of 4 arrested in Midtown. Well, in Midtown, of course, where a lot of these hotels have been taken over by illegal immigrants, individuals kicked out, apartment complexes. We're making way for all these illegal immigrants. I mean, this is happening in the United States of America. If you're not outraged, then then your head's not screwed on right. quite honestly.
Well, and let's talk about for a second, and I failed to bring this graphic, but I can send it to you, whoever, you know I'm good for it, is that the people who are most outraged about illegal immigration are, according to recent census data and recent surveys, are Latins, because the Latins that had to jump through hoops to get to the United States legally and work harder in order to stay here, now they see a whole group coming in behind them not having to do that.
Yeah.
And so it's not just like, oh, this is white pride or what have you. I mean, my mom is half Spanish, so I fit into this group. It's people who have had to jump those hoops and now see that those hoops are being removed, saying, why'd I do that?
And now we're seeing a huge uptick in this violence. And our story today takes us to Denver, Colorado, the Denver, Colorado suburb of Aurora, Colorado, which is now echoing with the unnerving rise of all of this criminal activity. And I mean echoing through the reverberations of people yelling for their loved ones outside in these courtyards, wondering if their loved ones are going to be shot in these apartment complexes. And it's not just an isolated incident. Take a listen to the Aurora police describe what is going on here in this town. Watch.
Also tonight, Aurora police say gang members have not taken over the Edge apartments. New video this week from Aurora Police Department shows the officers going door to door at those apartments yesterday. And now Aurora's interim police chief says the gang has not overrun that complex. This comes after officers spoke with residents over the past couple of days. Fox 31's Rachel Sauer joins us tonight with those details.
Yeah, Kim, well, this all comes after the Department of Homeland Security confirmed that individuals seen in video given to Fox 31 were members of a known gang. Now the Aurora Police Department says they are confident that the apartment complex is not currently being run by gangs.
This video given to Fox 31 on Wednesday showing armed men breaking into multiple apartments at the Edge at Lowry apartment complex shortly before a shootout happened in the parking lot. And it seemed almost as fast as people were moving out, others were moving in, raising concerns that a Venezuelan gang was taking over the apartment complex.
I know that this gang is here. I know that they are taking over apartment complexes. I haven't even been able to get straight answers.
In fact, the Department of Homeland Security confirmed to our news partners at News Nation some of the men pictured in the video were part of a Venezuelan gang known as Tren de Aragua.
So, and people wondering, there's been reports of the Hells Angels are getting on their motorcycles and they're coming down to Aurora, Colorado. No, there are no, that story is false. That's not happening. Unfortunately, I wish there were men on motorcycles coming, trying to take back America.
Well, we wish that they were actually taxpayer supported men on motorcycles coming in with the guns that we bought them with our taxpayers. That's part of the social contract.
Yeah.
What I'm curious about, so we're watching that footage or talking about that footage, and so the cops are just saying, no, these aren't gangs. The gangs haven't taken over this building. What are we looking at then?
Right.
Like, what exactly? Yeah. I'm looking at this thing that looks an awful lot like what you just said.
I know, and then, now we're going to get to it in a second here.
This is how landlords now operate, because some of the reporting said that the gangs were acting as the landlord, saying, you pay me the rent now to people living there, and in exchange for... What?
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to say, but then some of we can get into a rabbit hole there on that, but the mayor is confirming that this is actually happening. So regardless of what the police are telling the local Fox affiliate, that there are, in fact, multiple illegal Venezuelan gangs that have taken over multiple Colorado apartment complexes, and not just in Aurora, but now it's expanding. So it's not just an isolated incident. The city's mayor calls this a nightmare, armed illegal immigrant gangs from Venezuela taking over these apartment complexes. Former 24-year veteran J.J. Carroll of the Customs and Border Protection, friend of the show, just told me a few weeks ago how this was all unfolding. Listen.
Venezuelan prison gangs took over a 99 apartment unit complex. And then instead of sending the money to the landlord, they were collecting the rent. And then it comes out that the city council actually says, well, that's not the only apartment complex. There are several that they have taken over in Aurora, and now they run it all. Now, and you're having broad daylight armed robberies of jewelry stores in Aurora and outside of Denver. Look, Denver's collapsing. Denver has 700,000 people live inside Denver metro area. 70,000 of that 700,000 are illegal aliens. And you think they're going to stay in? No, they're going to bleed out. They're bleeding out to Aurora right now. Where else are they going to go in the metro area?
And Ryan Wilson in our chat says, thank you. Someone that calls the BS on the Hell Angels story. I live in Aurora and they are nowhere in sight. Yes. I mean, there's I see a bunch of people that posted that on social media have now retracted that story. So there's no truth to the Hells Angels are coming into Aurora, Colorado. If you are a member of the Hells Angels and you are planning on going to that town, let us know. But as far as we know, there is no confirmation of that. And in fact, a member of the Hells Angels has come out and denounced that, said that's not true at all. Meanwhile, according to ICE, the gang-involved lookouts are stationed on these buildings. This is according to ICE. This is not according to BS or whatever. This is from ICE, ICE field director in Aurora, who says that these individuals are staked out on buildings, lookouts for when individuals will show up, law enforcement and other people will show up. The field director of ICE says you'll start hearing whistles because someone they don't recognize is coming close to the apartment. And you'll hear cat calls, whistles, and so forth in order for them to sort of scatter and hide their drugs, hide weapons, etc. on that. Just so you understand what's happening here, these are former prisoners that have been released from prison in Venezuela, which are in the United States, organized and taking over buildings. And just take a look at this. This is on August 29th. This is in one of the surveillance. This is one of the suburbs outside of Aurora. These new surveillance footage shows members of this gang, reportedly of this gang. They haven't been able to confirm yet if they're members of this particular gang, but they're armed with the same weapons. Going door to door, they went into this person's garage. Now, this person left their garage door open at night, but that still doesn't give you the right to come in and steal their motorcycles out of their garage. So they did that, and they're stealing vehicles, stealing bikes, breaking into houses, stealing merchandise from stores, and of course taking over apartment complexes. Mayor Mike Kaufman of Aurora confirmed the unsettling takeover of these apartment complexes. So the police are saying one thing, the mayor is saying something else. In his words, this is an organized criminal effort. There have been 0 arrests associated with these crimes. Listen.
So there are several buildings actually under the same ownership, out-of-state ownership, that have fallen to these Venezuelan gangs. I'm trying to walk it back and do the investigation as to how there's a concentration of Venezuelans in these 3 buildings. Somebody put them there and somebody funded it, whether it's federal government or not. We're trying to find out who these gangs apparently are attracted to where there's a concentration of Venezuelan migrants. And so they've in fact have kind of pushed out the property management through intimidation and then collected the rents. We have now or have had it is ongoing operations with a task force of local law enforcement, state law enforcement partners, and federal law enforcement partners to root them out. And arrests have been made, but these operations are still ongoing.
So they're saying, okay, now we do have some arrests. So some arrests associated with this particular apartment complex. Okay. So other house break-ins, though? No arrests. Okay, how many people have been arrested? We sure love to know that. But of course, in Denver, sanctuary city, essentially a sanctuary city, of course, you welcomed in tens of thousands of illegals. So of course, this is going to happen. Let's pause right here, though, and think about this for a second. This is Aurora, Colorado, not some distant third world country plagued by, an insurgency problem. This is happening in American heartland suburbs right now. The very places American families choose to raise their family in because of their safety, their community, and quite honestly, their distance from broken, drug-infested criminal shitholes that democratic cities have become. And that's why they've moved to these towns. They don't want to be near it. This guy has my favorite take on these violent gangs. Listen. This has gone viral.
Oh, illegal immigrants from Venezuela are taking over apartment complexes in the United States with our guns that they stole from our gun stores because somebody didn't want to close the border. We weren't exaggerating about how bad things can get. Do you understand that the elites didn't leave the borders open because they care about people of color? Please, for 4 seconds, look past the bullshit compassionate thing that makes you so open-minded that your brains fall out. The elites want to crumble the world. That's why the UK is dealing with this, and every other civilized country is dealing with mass migration that is changing the culture and increasing violence and rape and destroying the nations that once existed. Because when they burn it down to ashes, the elites can buy it for pennies on the dollar and remake it with them in control. Not you, not Western idealism, which says that people have rights and dignity. Do you understand? So everybody on the left that's starting to see it now, go buy guns and pray that we can vote our way out of this instead of having to shoot our way out of it, dude.
Yeah. Pray that we can vote our way out of this so we don't have to shoot our way out of this. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. And in fact, I've seen some sort of local influencers in Colorado, women who said, I don't want to own a gun. I don't know anything about a gun. I know nothing about this, but I need to be safe now because I'm a young lady who's just trying to go to college. So I'm going to learn. Right? This is what we are being reduced to at this point.
But don't worry, Democratic Governor Jared Polis says that this is your imagination, that this is, even though the mayor, Mike Coffman of Aurora, just confirmed it's true, but it's in your imagination. Colorado's Governor Jared Polis dismisses migrant gang takeover of apartments as imagination, despite video and the mayor confirming the truth. So this is happening in Chicago, overnight in Chicago, as Libs of TikTok just reported, 32 Venezuelan illegal immigrants have taken over an apartment complex there. It's happened in Dallas, reportedly. It's happening in Baltimore. It's happening in New York. And it's happening in other suburbs around the country. Just saw in our chat someone saying a number of break-ins have spiked in Michigan. Let us know where you're joining us from today in the comments. Are you seeing a spike in these types of crimes near you, break-ins and other sort of crimes that you haven't seen before in your neighborhood?
Now, even if you're the kind of person who wants to deny that this is happening because you don't want to see it and you don't want to blame Democrats for it because you love Democrats, you have to also see that not only are Americans unsafe, but people in these migrant communities are as well, because what else are they doing? They are trafficking children. We went over the Department of Homeland Security report just last week that shows that we have lost 300,000 children, lost track of them because of these open borders and this allowance of anyone they want to be lawless. Are we saying they're all lawless? Of course not. A lot of them are victims. So if you want to care about them, you have to shut this down. Remember this DHS whistleblower Tara Rodas, who tried to alert Congress how migrants are allowed to traffic children with impunity? Listen to what she was trying to tell us.
We need to shine a light on this because it's so dark. Can you talk about where are these kids coming from? They're having panic attacks without their parents. So are they are coyotes bringing them across the border and they're being dropped at these facilities? How exactly are they arriving in these facilities in the first place before the United States government then traffics them around the other parts of the United States?
Yeah, well, it's a very well-organized criminal operation. So I can give you an example of one of our cases out of Texas. There was a Guatemalan living in Texas, and he had children who he was luring from Guatemala, telling them, look, you're making $2.50 a day now, but if you come to the United States, I'm going to pay you $6 an hour. So some of the children are lured, like they believed they were going to be Bill Gates rich, right? Instead of making $2.50 a day, they're more than doubling and tripling their wages. They're like $6 an hour. Wow. So they're lured. Some of them are stolen from their families. Sometimes their families are being sold a bill of goods that, hey, if you send your child to the United States, they're going to be able to send money back to you.
So these criminal enterprises, they have unfettered access to drugs and unfettered access to sexual slaves. This is happening.
Yes.
So, you don't want to, you want to pretend that you're compassionate to migrant communities, then you obviously don't care about these slaves. They're like animals to you if this is your position.
Really bothers me about that, the image we had before with the Colorado mayor, or Denver, or what was it, the Governor? Yeah, saying that it's just your imagination. The problem is, like, they in doing that, they never offer then an explanation as to what it is then. So it's like if you see these gangs in these apartment complexes, like holding people at gunpoint, breaking into things, And they're like, no, the taking over of this apartment complex is just your imagination. It was like, okay, then what is it? If I'm imagining,
and what? 4 different apartment complexes taken over. Then what just happened in Chicago overnight with 32 illegal Venezuelans that have just taken over? If that's not true, then what is the alternative here? And of course the liberal media will tell you that's like right-wing propaganda. Really? Right-wing propaganda? Not exactly.
That the U.S. government has admitted to losing all of these children,
right?
Migrant and trafficked, and
but that's the thing is like that's what they're doing. They're putting it back on the person that's witnessing it to explain it. They're like, well, no, it's just your imagination. It's like, then what is going on? If you can't just your explanation for what's going on can't just be like, well, you're imagining it. Like, no, there's something is going on. Like propaganda or not, tell me what you think is going on, and they won't do that. They just blame the witness.
Fortunately, we don't believe these politicians, and we have individual investigative reporters that we've had here on the show, independent investigative reporters who've uncovered this massive child trafficking ring, the illegal immigrants pouring across the border, the massive housing complexes outside of Houston, and so forth that we've covered here on the show. I mean, our list is endless.
But even in the report that we covered, the most haunting bit that I saw, I mean, all of it was haunting, but was it was an ICE agent who said, we found a child that we had been tracking. The U.S. government had been tracking a migrant child. They went to check in on that child, and the sponsor said, my husband's abusing this child, is in an inappropriate sexual relationship with this child. They're being abused. And the ICE agent said, we don't have anything to do about that. There's no recourse for us to take the child, take it somewhere else, arrest your husband. There's nothing we can do. So even when the good people who work for the U.S. government are being told this child is being sexually abused, and they're like, we can't do anything about it. We have no system for this because we tell ourselves we're so stinking compassionate to migrants. How can this be? And who's getting hurt? Well, again, let's revisit this New York Post reporting that we showed you the headline of earlier, that migrants are flooding New York City's justice system, making up 75% of arrests in Midtown as pathetic sanctuary city laws handcuff the cops. So what they're saying is that the Post has seen police reporting. They didn't show it to us. They're saying they've seen it. So we're going to have to take that with a grain of salt, that say that 75% of their arrests for crimes such as assault, robbery, and domestic violence are migrants. And in Queens, that figure is more like 60%. So it's really concentrated in Midtown Manhattan. And here is what they further report, that the problem is made worse by sanctuary laws that mean New York cops are not allowed to work with ICE on cases where they believe the suspects are in this country illegally. Additionally, the New York City Police Department says it's barred from tracking the immigration status of offenders. So, this guy, he keeps raping and murdering and stealing. We're pretty sure that he should be deported, but we have no way to even ask or work towards that goal. So stay here, sir. Rape to your heart's content. He says it almost makes it impossible for authorities to get their arms around the problem. And this one veteran prosecutor said, New York City eliminated a tool to get rid of violent criminals. What a mess. The sanctuary city is pathetic. It's disgusting. It's crazy. And making matters worse, police say that word has gotten out in the shelters about the city's lax bail guidelines, meaning migrants know that they're going to get kicked back on the street if they get nabbed, so they don't care. It must be very frustrating to be a law-abiding New York City taxpayer, or worse, small business owner, knowing that if not for this sanctuary status policy, you might have a fairly safe city. But that's not the social contract.
It even sucks for citizen criminals, because they're the only ones like bearing the brunt of criminality. Like, they go to jail. Like, I'd be pissed if I was a thief.
And had an ID.
We need more. I guess we need more vigilantes. We need more Batman. Like to swoop in, because apparently,
be careful what you say there.
I mean, if we don't have laws, then I guess we're a lawless nation right now. So illegal immigrants, they won't phone up ICE. They won't have any. They just walk free. Or if they do get nabbed, they're just released on bail. It's totally fine.
And I want to remind you of this clip that we showed in February of 2024, because it's not just willy-nilly bad guys who have gone rogue or working on their own or what have you. New York Police Commissioner Eddie Cabin Cabin, said this about how sophisticated migrant criminal rings are. He called them ghost criminals.
Today we are seeing similar situations with migrants. They're essentially ghost criminals. No criminal history, no photos, no cell phone, no social media. Sometimes we're even unclear on a name or a date of birth. And on top of that, these operations are extremely sophisticated. They intentionally try to evade the police.
This is exactly the dystopic scenario of Gotham City. I don't know what anybody is motivated to do about it. If you don't think it's intentional, I don't know what I would love to know some kind of alternative. Why is this happening?
It's not even a matter of do you think it's unintentional. It's not. We've proven here on the show that it is absolutely intentional with the great reporting from J.J. Carroll and Ryan Matta as part of their documentary series they're working on This is Treason. It's well documented. This is organized by the United States government, the Department of Homeland Security under Mayorkas. This has all been planned. This is exactly what the Biden administration has wanted. You can't get voters, bring in 20 million of them that will be on the government payroll and, vote just the way you want and remake the United States. And that's exactly what we're seeing. So these sort of blue city sanctuary dystopic hell is now spilling over into the suburbs of America. And that's exactly what they want because they want the destruction of the United States. Let us know your
one small thing that I saw on a guy that I like to follow who gives you sort of home safety tips is he says, your garage door is like a curtain. It's not really going to keep you safe. So you have to lock, not just close the garage door, but lock the door that goes into your house. That's something I've been thinking about lately. And, just securing those entry points as well, because we're here. We're in this worst case scenario right now, folks. Together, we're in it together, though. If you're watching this show, most likely you're in it with us. So, we got to trade tips and tricks right now. That's the job.